अस्सलामुअलैकुम एवरीवन, मेरा नाम है निताशा और मैं हूँ शाम की चाय की होस्ट, जहाँ पे हम बहुत ही कूल पाकिस्तानियों की कहानियाँ आपके सामने लेकर आते हैं। हमारा ये वाला सीज़न 1947 के पार्टीशन को एक्सप्लोर कर रहा है और आज हमारी गेस्ट हैं आलिया तैयबी।
Assalamu alaikum everyone. मेरा नाम आलिया तैयबी है and I am a consultant at the Citizens Archive of Pakistan. इससे पहले I was the head of research and digital archiving at the Citizens Archive. Currently, I'm pursuing a fellowship in the US.
Incredible background, माशाल्लाह. I think जो मैंने आपकी पिछले इंटरव्यूज़ देखे उसमें आपने एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग पर्सपेक्टिव दिया कि जो हम बुक्स में पार्टीशन के बारे में पढ़ते हैं वो एक बहुत डिफरेंट चीज़ है. It's a very different experience than hearing about it from people, right? There's a disconnect, right? तो और उस disconnect की वजह से कैप का प्रोजेक्ट शुरू हुआ. Can you tell us a little bit about that? और आप लोगों ने ये प्रोजेक्ट क्यों शुरू किया?
Of course. So the Citizens Archive of Pakistan started in 2007 when the project, the oral history project, which is where I was working exclusively, started was with a very simple quest. And that quest was that the history that we were hearing was not the history that we were reading. हमारे बड़े बुजुर्ग जो हमें पार्टीशन के बारे में बताते थे, अपनी कहानियां सुनाते थे, which was about the region in the 1920s, in the 1930s, in the 1940s. Those stories were not to be found anywhere in the books that we were reading in school, in our syllabus, in most of the documented history that we were witness to. And यही एक gap को register करके a group of Karachiites decided that they needed to do something. They were young, they were passionate, and they believed in identity and ownership. And they started a project. The project started very simply on a table.
Like all good projects start.
Yeah, so they said, okay, let's see what we can do. So the project started with volunteers. There was no funding, no money, no nothing. And the only objective was to figure out how we can get those stories that we are hearing as part of a memory into a space which can be tapped by many different types of people. And उस वक्त दुनिया में नया oral histories जो हैं वो taking on the space in the social sciences as part of academia, and this was something that was being recognized as missing. Like there was a lot of work being done on the subaltern, on the decolonization, on post-colonial studies across the world, because after the Second World War, there was a shift in the way we were looking at the world, and then again in the after 9/11, we saw another shift, and that was the non-recognition of indigenous voices from regions and their collectives. तो जब हम हमारी हिस्ट्री को पढ़ते थे तो हम एक बहुत ही colonial history पढ़ रहे थे. तो जब मैंने कैप ज्वाइन किया, my objective was very clear. I wanted to understand partition because I grew up in Aptabad. And Aptabad, अब शायद ज़्यादा लोगों को मालूम नहीं होगा, but it is basically a cantonment. कि मेरी family और मेरे इर्द-गिर्द जो भी लोग मौजूद थे, उन्होंने हिजरत नहीं की थी. They were already in this region prior to partition. So I remember my grandmother telling me of people who left, but she had very little recollection of people who came, right?
Right.
So because we were already there, और पाकिस्तान के अंदर सोशल मोबिलिटी इस तरह से वर्क करती है कि हमारा क्लास सिस्टम बहुत ज्यादा रिजिड और टाइट है. There is very little movement in upper mobility or lower mobility. जिस क्लास में आप पैदा होते हैं, in all probability आप उसी क्लास में मर भी जाते हैं.
क्लास में रहते हैं. बिल्कुल.
जी बिल्कुल. So there was no class mobility, and because I was born into a certain class, I kind of remained within it. So as a student growing up, till my university days, I had never experienced the idea of partition. I knew that partition was a phenomenon, but I understood it as independence. कि पाकिस्तान को आजादी मिली, and हमने सिर्फ उसी को समझा और उसी को celebrate किया. Because I had always thought of 14th August 1947 as the day of independence. I never thought about 14th August 1947 as also the partition of United India. So I started looking at partition when I moved to Karachi in 2014. And I heard the word Mahajir, right? So I started hearing it a lot around me. Again, like I said, because I am not part of the migration. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. We are approaching 70 years and we're still using this term. So what does this term mean in a multicultural setup like Karachi? And I was trying to explore this, and I was exposed to an organization that had already started moving a little towards this, right? So in 2014, I landed at CAP. I took on the burden of truth by wanting to explore this. And I started going out and speaking to people who remembered partition, right? And हम लोग का objective बहुत ही simple था. We wanted to bring those stories to the forefront that were the stories that we were hearing and not the ones that we were reading. And we realized that it was in these stories that there lurked a truth that people could resonate with.
So you've done like a beautiful job over the last 10 years just collecting these stories, right? And I'm hoping we can use these stories to almost paint a picture. And so let's first talk about pre-partition.
So when we talk about pre-partition memories, so CAP ke paas, we have a plethora of information on what we call pre-partition memories, which we split in two specific ways. One is pre-partition memories of Pakistan, what ends up becoming Pakistan, and pre-partition memories of India. So har insan within them carries memories of where they were at that time. So हम लोग ने जब ये खित्ते की तारीख को document करने का इरादा किया, that we wanted to use geography to explain history. Right. So we wanted to look at people who were present in what we call India and Pakistan today at the time that it was united. And we focus mostly because we are based in Pakistan and our archive is the Citizens Archive of Pakistan. So all our memories and all our stories originate and resonate with the story of Pakistan, right? So हम लोग ने बहुत से different लोगों की बीती सुनी, उसको रिकॉर्ड किया, उसको डॉक्यूमेंट किया, उसको डिफरेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स के थ्रू डिसेमिनेट भी किया. जिन patterns को मैंने observe किया, and I feel is something that I kind of always fall back on, and is that regardless of where you are or what class you belong to, by and large, all of us have very vague memories of our childhood. तो बहुत खूबसूरत लगता था जब हम पीछे जाते थे लोगों के साथ, and they would tell us of a time when the reality was very different from the way we are forced to believe things were. I am by no way saying that there was no tension or friction between Hindus and Muslims, but that was happening at the level of high politics.
Right.
When we talk about people and their experiences,
everyday people, yes.
Till the 1930s, there was not much tension that was happening in smaller rural communities. बड़े शहरों में मसले मसाइल जरूर थे, लेकिन छोटे गांव में, छोटे इलाकों में तब तक ये स्पिल नहीं हुआ था.
Right.
So जब वो लोग अपने बचपन की बातें हमें बताते थे, they would talk about very simple things like games that they would play, nursery rhymes that they would sing, the food that they would eat. And another thing that is really important is the idea of smell and the trigger of memory through smell. So oftentimes people would talk to us and tell us about a smell that they remember from their childhood, like I mean the time when it would rain. And जो मिट्टी की खुशबू आती है,
मिट्टी की जो खुशबू है.
So they would talk about that as a memory. So हमारी जो 1920s की generation थी और उनकी जो memories थी of the 1930s, like I mean I'm talking about people who were born in the so उनकी जो memory थी was very different, right? तो उनकी childhood memories are all about like joy of being a child, going to school, and then they remember the marked change that happens in the mid-1940s when suddenly things become more scary and there is an element almost of fear that is permeating the air around them,
Throughout.
although they do not know where it is coming from. But they feel this stress, this anxiety, where like there is more check and balance kept on people and their mobility. Because if you are a child and you're suddenly going out, your parents want to know more about kahan tak
Where
jaoge,
you're
kyun
going.
jaoge. Yeah, because
Kaun
now there is
hoga.
uncertainty.
Yeah.
Now there is
yeah.
uncertainty of children not being able to come home, of you
Right.
falling down certain spaces into a rabbit
Right.
hole. So there is
बिल्कुल.
that. So वो फिर अचानक से 1940s में हमें experience करते हैं. And
अच्छा.
then when we come to the end, to the tipping end of 1940s, and we come
The
towards
partition.
46, 47,
7.
we
yes.
talk about, yeah. So when we come to partition, it is when there is like this whole change in the visual narrative that is being shared with you, right? But 1947 एक वाहिद partition है दुनिया के अंदर जिसके अंदर the suffering is connected with hope, the idea of a homeland, the birth of a new nation. I mean, these are not just hollow words that are being used to create a nation's memory. It is actually what the people bring with them. It is what they carry with them. It's like उनके एक सूटकेस के अंदर उनकी थोड़ी बहुत चीजों के साथ साथ उनकी उम्मीदें भी थी जो वो लेके चले. One of my favorite stories is this gentleman that I interviewed. He was originally from Kasur. He was working for the Boy Scout because he was 16 years old. He was too young to be part of the Muslim League, but he was part of the Bacha Muslim League, which was the student wing of the Muslim League. And he was part of the rehabilitation process. So he told us, like when we sat down with him and he was telling us about his story, he was one of the gentlemen who was alive at the time of the 1940 Lahore resolution. So he remembered being in the crowd. He remembered seeing Kailaza Muhammad Ali Jinnah give his speech and the roaring success that ended up becoming. He talked about how it was never coined that this is the Pakistan resolution. It was just a All India Muslim League annual conference. And the first time that it was coined as a Pakistan resolution or a Lahore resolution was when it came out in the daily newspaper the next day. They published it as
they just marketed it as that.
Again, Pakistan resolution के बारे में ज़्यादा लोगों को पता होगा, 23 मार्च के बारे में पता होगा, but it is when you sit with a person and they tell you कि मैं उधर मौजूद था and this is what I witnessed, is when that moment of history stops being an event that happened to someone and becomes this living, breathing object that you share with somebody. The idea of Pakistan does not start with August 14th, 1947.
No.
The idea of independence and freedom does not start then. We as a region have always been free in our thoughts. We've had different people govern us as part of us, our political structure for sure. The only time that it has been stunted is during the colonial time, because colonial time वो है कि जब हमारी independent thought को खत्म कर दिया. उन्होंने कहा कि आप कॉलोनी हैं एंड कॉलोनीज अब रिकॉग्नाइज हो रही हैं पोस्ट कॉलोनियल स्टडीज के थ्रू, डीकोलोनाइजेशन थ्योरीज के थ्रू, दैट कॉलोनाइजेशन इज द मॉडर्न era's idea of slavery. Slavery तब तक खत्म कर दी गई थी. It was considered to be bad to slave human beings. तो उन्होंने कहा अगर human beings, जी बिल्कुल, so अगर हम human beings को स्लेवरी के अंदर नहीं डाल रहे तो फिर हमें उनको किसी और तरीके से अदर रिसोर्स तो इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा. कुछ दुनिया के रीजन्स ऐसे थे जहां पे कॉलोनाइजेशन के थ्रू रिसोर्सेज जनरेट हो सकते थे. आई मीन अगर हम पाकिस्तान की हिस्ट्री को देखें या साउथ एशिया की हिस्ट्री को देखें तो इट काइंड ऑफ इज आयरॉनिक, इज नॉट, that the Bank of England starts a specific coinage for the East India Company because there is so much loot coming out that they need to keep track of how much this colony is earning them. So when they said that India is the crown, is the jewel in their crown, they just did not mean the Kohinoor. You know, the Kohinoor is symbolic, but it was not just the Kohinoor. There was much more that India was bringing to Britain in terms of wealth.
In today's generation, what do you think Pakistan's identity is? we're like 75 years after partition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who are we?
As an individual, have a lot of trauma associated with modern nation states, because these
Okay.
modern nation states have, in my opinion, taken away from our identities as part of a larger group, and that is
Yes.
also causing us a lot of ruptures and traumas. But
Right.
if we kind of set that aside for some time and just talk about what does it mean to be a Pakistani, I think we still don't know.
We don't
We're
know.
still struggling 76 years
Yeah.
into our independence of
Yeah.
what it means, because it changes too dramatically with every new political slogan that is brought
Yes.
into the national consciousness. It just
Yes.
kind
Yes.
of is shifted constantly. Hamari political structures are such that it kind of feeds on the divide and rule still,
Yeah.
because that is something that we have taken from our colonial masters.
We haven't gotten over it. Yeah, we don't even know, and we are in everything. The way that our hair is, the way that our skin should be, what we define as beauty. Like, you know, English is like the elite language. You know, like why, right? When Urdu and Sindhi and Punjabi are so rich. No, we see that. We see that everywhere. Aaliyah, this has been just an incredible discussion. Thank you so much again, Aaliyah. Your time was. I'm so appreciative of the time that you spent with us. And so thank you for that. And thank you guys for watching. हम इंशाल्लाह एक और एपिसोड के साथ आएंगे. Until then, Allah Hafiz.